Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Untold Tales from This Side of Nowhere. I'm your host, Connor Jones, and this week I am joined by a special little guest. Can you say hi, William? We'll see if he talks more later. Yes, my son William woke up at about 5:30 this morning to help me record this episode. So, if he makes a comment here and there, don't be surprised. If you're new to the podcast, then you don't know this, but on the show we tell stories about growing up just about as close as you can to the middle of nowhere. That's Poverty Flats in northwestern Wyoming. I knew you'd have something to say about that. But first, here's a message from our sponsors. We are sponsored by Basin Pharmacy in Basin, Wyoming. Basin Pharmacy is your source for over-the-counter medicine, vitamins, and supplements. They also carry Russell Stover greeting cards and chocolates, which come in handy this time of year, especially if you might have forgotten about Valentine's Day. They supply all kinds of office supplies, and they're also right next door to the Copper Corner Cafe. So stop on in, grab your prescription, and get a bite to eat. They're open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to noon. We're also sponsored by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program distribute welcome baskets to new move-ins to Park County, and they also distribute table talk brochures on restaurant tables in Cody and Powell. Both of these resources are filled with advertisements from local businesses. So if you're interested in getting your business name out there, go ahead and shoot them an email. You can reach them at haleyj@wyomingwelcome.com. That's haleyj@wyomingwelcome.com. And now, the podcast. Bitter, biting cold. That has been the name of the game in February in northwestern Wyoming. And it's crazy because my twin brother Adam down in Salt Lake has been seeing rain and some highs in the 50s. I guess more recently it got really cold, but up here in the northern U.S., we've really been dealing with cold temperatures. I think the lowest I've seen was negative 15. I don't know what the wind chill was, but my poor dog has been sleeping in his kennel in the house. He's usually an outside dog, but when it dips down to below zero, man, I sure don't want to leave him out there, even with his heated sleeping pad. So he's been coming inside for the night, and I hope he doesn't get too used to it. It's going to warm up eventually, and he'll need to go back outside. So we'll see what happens. Well, most of the hunting seasons are over. I think geese might be the only thing you could still hunt right now until we get some spring turkey. But this story is about hunting and eyesight. And the title of this story is, "And in hindsight, my vision wasn't 20/20." Here we go. Having poor eyesight can present serious challenges to anyone trying to cultivate their image as a rugged outdoorsman. Just ask Teddy Roosevelt. When he arrived in the West, he discovered that wearing glasses was not only inconvenient, it could draw unwanted attention to you. The event in question happened in a bar in Mingusville, Montana, where Roosevelt encountered a man who harangued him for wearing glasses. "Well, looky here," the man said when he saw Roosevelt enter the bar. "Look at old Four Eyes." A round of nervous laughter greeted the man's name-calling. It's usually best to laugh along with someone who's holding two loaded pistols and putting holes in the clock on the wall. Approaching Roosevelt, he sneered, "Old Four Eyes is going to treat." Roosevelt wanted to escape notice, and likely the man's breath, so he sank into a chair behind the stove. He laughed off the man's comment about his glasses, but after taking the seat, was surprised to find the bully had approached and insisted on Roosevelt's buying a round for the place. Either because Roosevelt's glasses were dirty from his ride and he didn't see the guns in the man's hands, or simply because he didn't feel like buying a drink for a jerk, Roosevelt gave the man a right hook, followed by a left, and then another right. Written accounts don't mention it, but he likely straightened his glasses after the thirsty ruffian used the back of his head to polish one corner of the bar. Wearing glasses had gotten Roosevelt into trouble, but his Harvard boxing skills got him out. Most of the members of my family have dealt with poor eyesight, and I count myself lucky to be the only one who doesn't wear corrective lenses. Once when I was a kid, Mom had just gotten a new pair of glasses since her old ones had been damaged. While she was in the optometrist's office, my twin brother Fred and I played with her old glasses. Sliding them onto my nose, I was immediately greeted with the impression I was trying to see underwater. "Whoa," I breathed. "I can't see a thing. How does Mom see with these things on?" "Here, let me try them out," Fred said. He pulled the glasses from my face and slid them onto his nose. Blinking a few times, he peered at me and gasped, "Gee, Al, these things do wonders for your face." "Ha ha, very funny," I replied sarcastically. Besides Mom, my dad also wears glasses much of the time. His glasses mainly assist him in seeing long distances, which means he wears them while driving, and less conveniently, while hunting. Dad claims his eyesight worsened while he was in college, since all of his life was 6 inches from his face. After graduating and returning to Wyoming, though, he spent a considerable amount of time in the Red Hills, south of Poverty Flats, and all that time outdoors helped strengthen his eyesight. When I was in college, I noticed a similar phenomenon. It became most apparent when I returned home one weekend in the fall of my sophomore year of college to do some deer hunting. I went with my younger brother Caldwell, and we hunted the usual areas around Poverty Flats. Someone must have warned the deer we were coming, which isn't uncommon in a small town where news travels fast. "Hey, did you hear Al is back home from college?" One mule deer, a doe, said to another. "No, I didn't," the second deer replied, this one a 6-point buck. "What's he doing back home? The semester doesn't end for at least a couple months." "Oh, I imagine he's here to do a little hunting," said the first deer casually. "You don't think we ought to be worried about that, do you?" replied the buck, with a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Oh, no, it's nothing to worry about," the doe chuckled reassuringly. "We all know Al couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with that rifle. I'd be more worried about getting run over by Al's truck than getting shot by him." "What about that doe he took his senior year of high school?" the buck asked. The first deer actually laughed this time. "Oh, that? He tripped and his gun went off. He was as surprised as she was." Relief was apparent in the buck's face, if indeed deer can appear relieved. "He just won't give up, will he? You would think after all these years he would have gotten tired of wasting money on ammunition and traipsing all over the place. You know he refers to hunting as an acronym?" "No, what does he say it stands for?" "Hiking until nauseatingly tired." The two deer had a good laugh at that, and went back to pilfering corn from Uncle Greg's cornfield. Just then another deer walked up, throwing glances over his shoulder every now and then. "Hey, what are you two doing out here in the open? Don't you know it's hunting season?" The first two deer laughed, obviously entertained by this deer's unwarranted anxiety. "Don't worry, Greg and his boys are done for the season. They already filled their tags," the buck said through a mouthful of corn. Yeah, but Hal and his brother Caldwell are headed this way right now, the third deer hissed. Caldwell? The doe asked, her head popping up in alarm. Uh-huh. He and Hal both have deer tags. The doe looked grim, or at least as grim as a doe can. Well, that changes things. The buck swallowed loudly and started scanning his surroundings. We better get out of here. I heard Caldwell shot a deer last year from his bedroom window. Nah, you heard wrong, the third deer said. It was Al, not Caldwell, and he didn't shoot a deer from his bedroom window. He shot at a deer and took out his bedroom window. The three deer laughed heartily, as deer often do when sharing a joke at my expense. Little did they know Caldwell and I had parked the truck and were headed their way. All right, the doe chuckled. Al's parked the truck and he and Caldwell are headed our way. Let's head for the hills. So it was that Caldwell and I entered the cornfield and found it devoid of deer. The next place we tried was also a bust. I only had 2 days to hunt before I had to get back to college, so I was starting to get desperate when we failed to spot even a single deer in 6 hours of hunting. You know, Caldwell said, we could try the Peterson place up in Emblem. When I went fishing with Mr. Peterson this summer, he said he has deer all over his place, and I would be welcome to come hunt any time. The Peterson place, huh? I asked as I peered through my binoculars. Gee, it sure gets dark fast in October. What do you mean? Caldwell replied. It hasn't gotten dark yet. You just haven't taken the lens caps off your binoculars. Oh, yeah, I muttered, lowering the binoculars and examining the black caps that covered the ends of both eyepieces. Well, what do you say? Caldwell asked. I think all that time staring at a computer screen has made my vision worse, I mused. No, not that, Caldwell said. I mean, what do you think about hunting the Peterson place? Oh, the Peterson place. Yeah, let's try it out. Maybe we can go over there tomorrow. Do you want to call Mr. Peterson? So it was that the next day we hopped in the truck at a half hour or so before daylight and drove the 15 miles from our place in Poverty Flats over to the Peterson place in Emblem. It was cold, and our breath hung in clouds around us as we pulled up to the Peterson farmhouse. Tendrils of daylight had begun spilling over the horizon in the east, injecting the clouds with a tinge of pink and illuminating the landscape with a soft glow. Caldwell and I retrieved our rifles from the truck, and Mr. Peterson opened the front door. Good morning, boys, he grinned congenially. You come to clear some of the deer off my cornfield? Sure, Caldwell chorused. Thanks for letting us hunt your property. No problem, Mr. Peterson said with a dismissive wave of his hand. I only want the big old whitetail buck that comes out of the trees down that-a-way, so you can have any of those deer. Which deer would that be, Mr. Peterson? I asked, adjusting the position of my rifle sling on my shoulder. Well, those ones, he said, pointing behind me. I turned to survey the cornfield, which had recently been combined, leaving rows of yellowed corn stalks whose dry leaves rattled in the morning breeze like dry bones. Ah, yes, you mean those gray blobs over there? I asked. Mr. Peterson scratched at some stubble on his chin. They look like mule deer to me. Caldwell coughed and said, Well, awesome. We'll see if we can sneak down this dry canal and get a shot. Sounds like a plan, Mr. Peterson replied. Good luck. As we crunched our way across the Petersons' gravel drive, Caldwell hissed, You really can't see those deer, Al? Oh, I can see them all right, I replied. I couldn't tell you which end is the head and which end is the rump, though. It was disconcerting to find my eyesight had deteriorated so much. I had always been able to see well, and I took some pride in being the only one in the family who didn't wear glasses. Caldwell straightened his own glasses and peered down into the ditch bed. Looks like it's dried out. I'm glad, too. I hate tramping through mud. I nodded and followed Caldwell down into the ditch, glancing up to make sure the deer were still there. At least 6 gray blobs were standing about 400 yards away, and they still appeared to be motionless. The emblem deer apparently weren't familiar with the Joneses' reputation as fearsome hunters. Down in the ditch, which was nearly 5 feet deep, we crouched to hide our advance from our quarry. As always seems to be the case whenever I'm approaching deer with a rifle in my hand, my heart rate started to pick up, and even though Caldwell and I were hardly setting a record pace in our crouching jog, my breath started coming in gasps, and my heart pounded like I was running the 100-meter dash. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and the thrill of the chase electrified my every move and heightened my senses. I was keenly aware of the crunch of each footstep, and the vivid color of Caldwell's hunter's orange stocking cap, the drab tan of his coat, and the light blue of his jeans. I smelled damp earth and the dusty scent of dry cornstalks. Every muscle in my body pulsed with pent-up energy like a taut rope humming in the wind. My hunter's instincts were on fire, and through me the generations of hunters who had come before lived and breathed, propelling me forward and guiding each step. "We must be getting close," I hissed to Caldwell, and we paused to peek over the edge of the ditch. Slowly I straightened up, inching my head over the edge of the ditch with supreme care, expertly raising my rifle to rest on the bank and preparing to lay down a withering field of fire at a moment's notice. The deer wouldn't know what hit them. "Al," Caldwell whispered beside me, "where'd they go?" My keen senses failed to detect the presence of the deer at first. One thing was for sure, they weren't where they had been when we entered the ditch. Quickly surveying the area, I didn't see any deer, but noticed a few gray blobs farther out towards the end of the field. "There," Caldwell hissed. "They must have heard us." I wasn't sure how that could be possible, given the incredibly stealthy nature of our approach. Be that as it may, the deer were now much farther away than we had hoped they would be when we came out of the ditch. "Think we can make a shot from this distance?" Caldwell asked. I squinted over the top of my rifle and identified what I was pretty sure was a deer, then dropped my right eye down to my scope, squeezing my left eye shut. The magnified image of 6 mule deer filled my vision, and I took careful aim. "I think we can, with this dead rest," I assured Caldwell. Beside me, he rested his cheek on the stock of his gun and drew a bead. "Ready?" Caldwell asked. "On the count of 3, I breathed. Carefully, I placed my crosshairs right above the shoulder of the nearest deer, a 4-point buck. 1, I breathed, my heart pounding in my ears. 2, I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my hands steady. Either the ground was shaking, or my hands were trembling like a pair of cottonwood leaves in a windstorm. 3, I blurted out. Blam! Blam! 2 rifle shots rang out, breaking through the cool morning air like thunderclaps. I ejected the spent brass and jacked another bullet into the chamber. Quickly lining up my scope again, I hoped against hope I would see a couple deer on the ground. Instead, I was greeted by the unmistakable sight of 6 mule deer with their heads raised, looking around in alarm. "Dang, we missed 'em," Caldwell hissed. I responded with another expertly placed shot that sent up a puff of dirt near the feet of the buck I had my sight. I responded with another expertly placed shot that sent up a puff of dirt near the feet of the buck I had set my sights on. Now that we had their attention, the deer decided it might not be best to give the 2 hapless hunters a third opportunity, and they turned tail and began to run. Surging out of the ditch, Caldwell and I crossed the dirt road that ran along the edge of the cornfield, where I slid onto my stomach to give it one last shot. Caldwell flopped down beside me, and we commenced applying the old hunting principle that the more lead is in the air, the better chance there is that something will run into it. Our last-ditch effort was nearly as effective as the first 2 shots we fired. Finally, after the remaining 3 bullets in my magazine had been spent, and Caldwell's too, I pulled myself slowly to my feet and dusted off my pants. The deer disappeared into a copse of trees on the far end of the field, with barely a backward glance. No doubt to go tell all their friends and acquaintances what terrible shots those Jones boys were. Typical. Slowly we gathered up our spent brass like so many pieces of a shattered dream and trudged back to the truck. "Well, we missed 'em again," Caldwell finally said, breaking the silence. "Yep," I sighed. "And today is my last day to hunt." "Maybe we'll see them again this evening," Caldwell suggested. "Maybe." When we got back to the truck, Mr. Peterson was grinning ear to ear. "I heard plenty of shooting. Sounds like World War III over there, but I don't see any dead deer." He chuckled in that way only an old-timer can when rubbing salt in a wound. "Thanks for letting us hunt your property," I said. "No problem," Mr. Peterson grinned. "Maybe we can come back another time and give it another shot," I asked. "Based on what I've seen from you two, it'll probably take more than one," Mr. Peterson said, barely containing his laughter. "Why don't you two come back this spring?" he said. "This spring?" Caldwell asked. "I won't need my field plowed again until then," Mr. Peterson chortled. Caldwell and I smiled tightly and shook our heads. Pride dies a hard death, I guess. As we drove slowly away from the Petersons' house, I let out a long sigh. "Where do we go now?" Caldwell asked me. "Well, the morning hunt is about shot." "No pun intended," I said. "Let's go home and figure out where we'll hunt tonight." Caldwell and I didn't fill our tags that season, but looking back, spending time with my brother in the outdoors was worth it. That's the great thing about hunting. It gets you out in nature, gives you the chance for some exercise, and provides quality time you might not otherwise spend with family. "I couldn't agree more," said the optometrist, glancing up from the sheet of paper. "Now, are you going to want square rims or round ones? I also have a variety of colors. Take your pick." Well, there you have it. Another untold tale from this side of nowhere. Yeah, my eyesight is not what it used to be, and I probably do need to get fitted for some glasses. I guess it's just my pride that's making me hold on to my good eyesight, or what's left of it. Every single one of my family members wears glasses or contacts, and it would probably be good if I joined the ranks. I've been wearing my wife's glasses when I drive at night, but otherwise I can see pretty well. But I don't know, the clock is ticking, and I probably should get in there for some glasses. Maybe you're fighting the urge to buy some glasses or to get your eyes checked, or maybe you have a good story about wearing glasses while hunting or fishing, and I'd love to hear about it. You can send me an email at untoldtalesthepodcast@gmail.com, or you can respond to one of our posts when this episode drops on Facebook. I love to get messages from listeners, and I almost always mention it on the podcast in the next episode. Hopefully you didn't fall asleep like William did listening to this, and you feel inclined to go give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd sure appreciate your review and your rating us with 5 stars. As always, it's been a pleasure sharing this story with you, and this has been another untold tale from this side of nowhere, where we work twice as hard for half as much, and still find time for the important things, like fishing. See you next time, folks.